You want to be comfortable and you want to have friends and you want to be like early days, being like short, being 5 feet tall. What was Danny DeVito big break? I wasn't Cuckoo's Nest, but everybody thought I was an inmate. But Taxi was my big break. That was the big one. 1978, before many of you were born.
Party old penguin. Nastier than ever. Nastier than ever.
Danny DeVito just hit 80, but his life today is far from the Hollywood fairy tale fans imagine.
It's almost like they've set themselves a challenge to try and find something in the script to offer you that you will finally say no to, because you seem to do just about anything on that show.
Do basically anything yeah.
Behind the jokes and red-carpet smiles, insiders claim he's living in isolation, battling health issues, and surrounded by whispers of secrecy.
You start thinking, well, you may be able to compensate with your personality.
Has the comedy legend been quietly abandoned, or is something darker being hidden from the public? Let's find out. Danny DeVito may be Hollywood's beloved icon today, but his real-life story is far from glamorous. It's downright heartbreaking. His own mother once admitted she never wanted him, and his father, fueled by alcohol, turned their home into a nightly battlefield. Police were called to their house 17 times before Danny even hit his teenage years.
Yeah, I grew up in Los Angeles, and I went to school with his kids at a school in the Valley, and I've known his family kind of adjacently for, 30 some odd years.
But the darkest part was the secret he carried alone. Behind the laughs and movie fame, DeVito has lived with a rare, painful condition that made every single day an uphill battle. Studios once dangled millions in front of him, pressuring him to fix his face with surgery. Instead, he tore up the contract and walked away. Now, at 80 years old, the shocking truth about Danny DeVito's suffering and how he defied Hollywood's cruelest demands is finally being exposed. He wasn't supposed to exist. Born in Neptune, New Jersey in 1944, Danny came into this world unwanted. His mother, Julia, was already 40, exhausted from raising several kids, and had no interest in starting over. She admitted it herself years later. "I didn't want him, but I'm proud of him." Brutal honesty or cold confession? Depends who you ask. For Danny, it was a scar that never faded. That rejection haunted him, like a shadow he could never shake. But instead of breaking, he turned it into fuel.
I said, okay, I'll go. I read the script, and it's the part of Louis De Palma. You got to make an impression, right? Yeah. I walk in the office, and they're all sitting there in this beautiful sofa like this, and I had the script in my hand, and I said, one thing I want to know before we start. Who wrote this shit?
And if his mother's words weren't enough, his father made sure life at home was just as messy. By day, Daniel Sr. was the charming candy shop owner in Asbury Park, smiling at neighbors and handing out sweets. But by night, he was a different man, drunk, furious, unpredictable. People on the outside saw a kind family man. Danny knew better. He knew the sound of the first bottle cracking open meant danger. He learned to read the warning signs, the heavy footsteps, the slurred voice, the shift from laughter to rage. Some nights, he disappeared into closets just to survive. Danny grew up with a mother who admitted she never wanted him and a father who could turn violent at any second. It wasn't a childhood, it was a battlefield. And yet, that chaos shaped the man he would become. Other times, Danny didn't just hide, he escaped. When his father turned violent, he ran straight to the neighbors. Between 1950 and 1955, police were called to his house 17 times. 17. It wasn't just a troubled home, it was practically a crime scene on repeat. But here's the twist. The chaos that broke so many kids in his neighborhood became his reason to rise above it. Danny made a vow early on: no booze, no self-destruction. Unlike his father, he stayed sober for life. And in 1992, he turned that vow into action by launching Little Giants, a program that's quietly rescued over 15,000 kids growing up in homes just like his.
Some fun. Are you ready for a miracle?
By 14, though, Danny knew staying put meant ending up dead or hooked. His neighborhood was falling apart. Was everywhere. Friends were dropping like flies. Two of his closest buddies didn't even make it to 16. Out of 12 kids he grew up with, only 3 survived past 25 without ending up behind bars or buried. Danny wasn't about to be another statistic. He studied like his life depended on it, because it did. He scraped together $237 from odd jobs and even convinced a parish priest to beg his parents to let him attend oratory mandatory prep school. He timed his request carefully, catching his father only when the guilt of last night's violence sobered him up. His mother, maybe out of shame for admitting she never wanted him, finally agreed. That decision didn't just save Danny, it changed everything. But his story wasn't just about escaping addiction and poverty. Danny was also battling a rare genetic condition, Fairbanks disease. That's why he only grew to 4 feet 10 inches. But the real hell wasn't the height. It was the pain. His hips, knees, and back burned with agony every single day. In his 20s and 30s, his pain lived at a constant 6 to 8 out of 10. Yet he refused to quit. He refused painkillers too. Doctors begged him to take them, but he didn't want to end up like his father, dependent on a bottle. Instead, he did his own stunts, pushed through the pain, and even collapsed 4 times while filming One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He shrugged it off as just part of the role.
And it was very odd to be out there at the time. So I made a few rounds, what they call making rounds. I brought my pictures around to people, and I couldn't get to first base. I didn't have an agent. I couldn't.
And here's the part Hollywood rarely talks about. Behind the spotlight, Danny quietly donated over $12 million to fund research for bone disorders like his. No flashy headlines, no foundation with his name slapped on it. Just anonymous checks written to make sure kids with the same condition didn't have to suffer like he did. And before he was an actor, Danny lived another life no one expects. He was a beautician. Yep, the man who'd one day steal scenes on the big screen spent 1,500 hours in beauty school, graduating second in his class. Before Hollywood, he was curling hair and painting nails. He worked in his sister Angela's salon, ironically named Curl Up and Dye. And what started as a teenage hustle to flirt with girls turned into a legitimate career. Danny was so good with a pair of scissors that people booked him months in advance. He even snagged awards for a style he invented called the Neptune twist. Imagine that, Hollywood's future rebel actor, once crowned a hairdressing king. Fate stepped in the back door of that salon. One day, while styling a client's hair, her husband, who just happened to be a theater producer, suggested Danny audition for a play. Danny never dreamed of being an actor. Curiosity got the better of him. In 1962, he applied to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, not for acting, but to learn makeup. When the school asked him to perform a monologue, he reluctantly read a scene from The Rainmaker. No training, no prep, yet something sparked. Instead of a makeup program, they offered him an acting slot. At first, he wasn't interested. He went back to his salon chair, curling hair and cashing tips. But when the Academy called again 3 days later with a partial scholarship, he took the leap. That single phone call rerouted his destiny. Fast forward a few years, and he's in New York City, splitting a roach-infested apartment with none other than Michael Douglas. Rent was $75, and they could barely swing it. Douglas kept his famous father's name a secret, and the two of them survived on canned beans, stale bread, and the occasional miracle gig. Once they blew their last $27 printing headshots and hustling them across the city. Douglas landed some work. Danny didn't. Still, their bond held. And years later, Douglas would fight to have Danny cast in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That role was the break of a lifetime. But before the breakthrough came the brutal grind. Between 1967 and 1970, Danny auditioned 248 times. Out of those, he booked just 3 measly gigs, scraping together less than $800 total. To keep himself afloat, he worked every humiliating side job you could imagine. Parking cars, standing stock still as a department store mannequin, even cleaning animal cages at the LA Zoo for $1.85 an hour. He read lines to chimpanzees, literally, just to stay in practice.
It was in front of an audience on a Friday night. We'd work all week. You know, you go Monday through Friday and you rehearse it. And then on Friday night at 7 o'clock, we had the audience, like this size audience.
At one point, he had no roof at all, living in his beat-up VW Beetle, showering at the YMCA, and eating at soup kitchen. Hollywood wouldn't dare tell you this part. Producers didn't just reject him, they tried to rebuild him. Agents pushed for drastic surgery, leg-breaking and bone-lengthening procedures, facial reconstruction. One studio even offered him the equivalent of $1 million paycheck if he'd let them remake his body into something more marketable. Danny's response? He burned the contract in a beach bonfire. He refused to sell himself out. As he told one casting director, "I'd rather be a first-rate version of myself than a second-rate version of someone else."
It was a ball. It was a blast. It was a part that I really wanted. You know, I wasn't I hadn't done anything. I did a couple of things, like a couple of TV shows, like.
But that moral high ground came at a cost. His early roles were barely survivable. Off-Broadway shows paying $25 a week, overnight printing press shifts just to cover rent. His first film gig, a lousy $200, plus pneumonia from filming in icy water. He slept in barns just to save money. Depression set in, and for a time, he nearly quit altogether. Then came 1972. His father fell ill, and Danny was too broke and too busy to be there much. When his father died, the guilt consumed him. Crushed and hopeless, he applied for a postal job and seriously considered leaving acting forever. But the very same day his offer letter came through, the phone rang, and on the other end was the call that would change everything. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was the role that flipped Danny's story upside down. After years of pain, poverty, and humiliation, it all came down to one audition. And fate had a twisted sense of humor, because the producer who helped him land it was none other than his old roommate, Michael Douglas. Even crazier, Danny had already played Martini years earlier in the stage version. So while the casting team doubted him, he walked in practically born for the part. The movie wasn't some cushy Hollywood set either. It was filmed inside a real mental hospital, with actual patients filling in as extras. That unsettling environment brought out something raw, unfiltered, and electric in Danny's performance.
You're a cab driver? What do you mean busting my chops here? Make them believe you're a regular person.
He was on screen for less than 6 minutes, 5 minutes and 52 seconds to be exact, but left such a mark that even director Milos Forman refused to replace him when the studio pushed for a bigger name. The film went on to sweep the Oscars, taking home 5 of the biggest awards. And while DeVito himself wasn't nominated, suddenly Hollywood couldn't ignore him anymore. He was officially on the map. But in true Danny fashion, just when the industry thought he'd follow the safe route, he made a move that looked insane. In 1978, he turned down 3 movie roles to chase a TV sitcom called Taxi. At the time, television was considered career suicide. Film actors didn't stoop to TV. Even his own agent begged him not to do it. But Danny didn't care about Hollywood rules. When he read the script, he knew he had to play Louis De Palma. And when it came time to audition, he didn't just read lines. He unleashed a full 7-minute monologue that left the entire room stunned. ABC executives panicked over his height, just 4 feet 10 inches. But creator James L. Brooks went to war for him, threatening to quit if the network refused to cast Danny. That's how much belief his raw talent inspired. And here's the kicker. Danny didn't even fight for equal pay. He signed his Taxi contract immediately, even though it paid him 40% less than his co-stars. Why? Because he wasn't playing it safe. He was playing for legacy. And it worked. Before Taxi, he'd been rejected from nearly 200 auditions in just 3 years. After Taxi, Hollywood finally had to admit, Danny DeVito was a force they couldn't erase. Casting directors had written Danny off for years. Too short, too weird-looking, too different. But the moment Taxi hit TV screens, all those so-called flaws turned him into a phenomenon. Within just 8 episodes, he'd received over 11,000 fan letters. That kind of response was unheard of, especially for a supporting character. Louis De Palma wasn't your typical sitcom funny man. He was nasty, rude, unapologetically awful, and America couldn't get enough. Every week, censors fielded 3 to 5 complaint letters about Louis' language, insults, and behavior. But instead of dialing it down, Danny doubled down. Before filming, he'd sit alone, silently replaying every rejection, every insult, every casting director who told him he'd never make it. He turned all that bitterness into comedy gold. By 1980, Louis De Palma was bigger than the show itself. 93% of Americans could recognize the character just by his voice or silhouette. His cramped little dispatch booth, custom built to his size, became one of the most iconic TV sets of all time.
Yeah. Hey, you want to make a bet?
Then came the awards nobody thought he'd ever win. In 1980, he snagged a Golden Globe. A year later, he shocked the industry with an Emmy. It was controversial. Judges didn't even want to nominate him at first because Louis was considered too awful to celebrate. Yet the Emmy win proved a powerful truth. Audiences loved villains. That shift would shape the future of television for decades. Danny's Emmy speech only fueled the legend, the shortest in history. Just 12 words. Thank you. I'm really happy about this. Taxi is the best show on television. No long lists, no politics, no Hollywood grandstanding. Just blunt and unforgettable. That same year, Vegas bookies had veteran actor Jack Albertson as the favorite for the Golden Globe. Danny beat him. It wasn't just a win, it was a middle finger to the old guard.
I want to thank the Academy very much for this award. And I'd like to thank all the people at Paramount and all the people at ABC and at John Charles Walters, and Jimmy Burrows, and Rhea.
Hollywood came running. NBC tried to poach him with a jaw-dropping offer, $175,000 an episode for his own show. More than 11 times what he was making. Danny said no. Loyalty mattered more than money, at least then. He stuck with the Taxi cast. But in the middle of this whirlwind, Danny's personal life flipped too. He met Rhea Perlman in the most bizarre way possible. She came over to break up with his roommate and ended up talking to Danny for 6 straight hours. He later admitted he knew within 22 minutes that he wanted to marry her. A year later, she was on Taxi too, playing Louis' love interest. Nobody on set knew they were a real couple. Their chemistry was so strong, people just thought it was great acting. What the public didn't see was how fast and reckless it all moved. They secretly moved in together after just 2 weeks, cramming into Danny's tiny 450 square foot apartment. Even after they tied the knot in 1982, they kept separate dressing rooms on set to avoid gossip about favoritism. But the truth, they were already plotting something far bigger than sitcom fame. In 1983, behind Hollywood's back, the couple quietly launched their own production company, Jersey Films. While other actors were chasing paychecks, Danny and Rhea were plotting to take control of the industry itself.
Just keep going. Just keep going. Do whatever comes your way that you love.
They weren't just co-stars, they were obsessed. Danny DeVito and Rhea Perlman made a pact most Hollywood couples would never dare to make. They'd never go more than 2 weeks without cooking up something creative together. Even while filming Taxi, they were sneaking away at night and on weekends, plotting their next move like partners in crime. And it worked. Over 40 years later, they've racked up 17 projects together, turning their marriage into one of Hollywood's strangest business arrangements. But while other TV stars struggled to break free from the small screen, Danny pulled off the impossible. When Taxi ended in 1983, he didn't fade, he exploded. That same year, he slid into Terms of Endearment, a film that snagged Best Picture at the Oscars. The following year, he bulldozed his way into Romancing the Stone, turning a $10 million flick into a $115 million box office monster. Hollywood suddenly realized the short, loud guy wasn't just a sidekick, he was a goldmine. By 1986, Danny stopped playing it safe. He went full villain in Ruthless People, snarling his way through a role as a husband so slimy, he wouldn't pay ransom for his kidnapped wife. Audiences loved it. The film raked in over $71 million on a shoestring budget, and Danny scored a Golden Globe nod. He wasn't afraid to be hated, and that's exactly why Hollywood couldn't look away. Then came the power move, directing. In 1987, DeVito basically strong-armed producers into letting him direct Throw Mama from the Train. He told them flat out, "I'll act if I direct." They caved. That's how Danny rolled. No compromises, no apologies. The set was chaotic, the stunts were brutal. Anne Ramsey took bruises like battle scars, and the train scene alone chewed up 6 days of filming. But when the dust settled, Danny had pulled off another hit and earned himself even more critical respect.
To a situation where you can't make a mistake.
And then came Twins. The idea sounded like a drunken dare. Pair Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito as long-lost twin brothers. Hollywood laughed until the profits came in. Instead of upfront salaries, Danny, Arnold, and director Ivan Reitman gambled on back-end profit. They split 40% of the take, and when the movie hauled in $216 million worldwide, over $500 million today, each man pocketed $35 to $40 million. Overnight, DeVito wasn't just a quirky character actor, he was a leading man. Proof that you didn't have to be tall, ripped, or conventionally handsome to dominate the screen. You just had to outsmart everyone else. While fans were busy watching him clown around on screen, Danny was plotting something bigger behind the scenes. He had already tested the waters directing The Ratings Game in 1984 and an episode of Amazing Stories in 1986. Then, in 1989, he reunited his Romancing the Stone crew for The War of the Roses, a vicious, funny, painfully real take on divorce that was so raw. Germany turned the movie's title into slang for toxic breakup. Danny's style was unhinged, emotional, unapologetically weird, and that's exactly why Hollywood couldn't stop calling. Even the opening credits of The War of the Roses screamed that this wasn't your typical Hollywood divorce comedy. Designed by legends Saul and Elaine Bass, they set the tone for a film that was brutal, stylish, and viciously funny. And with it, Danny DeVito proved he could juggle acting and and directing like few others in the business. But then came 1992, the year DeVito went completely off the rails in the best way possible. Tim Burton handed him the role of a lifetime, the Penguin in Batman Return. And Danny didn't just play him, he lived him. Hours in the makeup chair turned him into Oswald Cobblepot, a grotesque mix of horror and heartbreak. He went method, staying in character even when the cameras weren't rolling, creeping out cast and crew alike. His version of the Penguin wasn't just a villain, it was nightmare fuel wrapped in tragedy. MTV even nominated him for Best Villain. And years later, Danny admitted he'd do it all over again if Burton called. That's how deep the obsession ran.
Soft beds, and we will snatch them.
But Danny wasn't content just being Hollywood's freaky villain. That same year, he flexed his power behind the camera with Hoffa, a heavy, uncompromising biopic about the notorious labor leader. He cast Jack Nicholson as Hoffa and gave himself a supporting role, basically daring audiences to take him seriously as a filmmaker. It wasn't lighthearted comedy. It was speeches, anger, corruption, and blood on the floor. Working with David Mamet on the script, DeVito threw himself into a project most actors would never touch. The message was clear, he wasn't playing around anymore, and just when Hollywood thought they had him pegged, Danny made his boldest move yet. He started his own production company, Jersey Films. This wasn't some vanity project to keep his name in lights. With Michael Shamberg and later Stacey Sher at his side, DeVito quietly built one of the most influential indie studios of the 1990s. And in 1994, Jersey Films took on a script no one else wanted, Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction. Studios called it too weird, too violent, and too risky. Danny didn't care. He bankrolled it, gave Tarantino space to work, and promised to let the chaos breathe. The budget? A measly $8 million. The result? A cultural earthquake that grossed over $200 million and redefined filmmaking. Without DeVito, Pulp Fiction may never have happened.
So we developed the script, Pulp Fiction. We brought it around to almost every studio in town. Nobody would make it.
They laughed at you, didn't they? They laughed at you.
Yeah, well, it's a unique experience, and he's a wonderful writer.
But Danny wasn't done. In 1996, he switched gears again, directing Matilda based on Roald Dahl's book. On screen, he was a sleazy, selfish father. Off screen, he showed a side few expected: compassion. When young star Mara Wilson's mother fell gravely ill, Danny and his wife, Rhea Perlman, stepped in as surrogate family. DeVito even brought a near-final cut of the film to her hospital bed so she could watch her daughter shine before she passed away. Years later, Wilson would say Danny and Rhea were like her favorite aunt and uncle. It was one of the rare times the man who played monsters and villains revealed his heart. By 1999, Jersey Films was unstoppable. That year, they released Man on the Moon, a wild, strange, and deeply human story about comedian Andy Kaufman, yet another gamble that only someone like DeVito would dare to make. Danny DeVito had history with Andy Kaufman. Back in the Taxi days, the two were co-stars, oddballs who somehow understood each other. So when Man on the Moon came around, Danny didn't just step in as Kaufman's manager on screen, he produced the film, making sure Andy's story got the bizarre, heartbreaking treatment it deserved. Jim Carrey went full possession, practically becoming Kaufman, terrifying everyone around him with his off-camera antics. Critics raved, but the box office tanked. Most producers would have buried the project and moved on. Not Danny. He doubled down, insisting some films mattered more than money. It was loyalty, or maybe stubbornness, that defined him. But while the world saw success, DeVito was hiding something brutal. For decades, he lived with Fairbanks disease, a rare bone disorder that left him in constant pain. Surgery after surgery, setback after setback, and still, Hollywood told him to shut up and smile. Executives warned him, if he looked weak, he'd never get cast. So Danny put on the mask. He'd film scenes standing tall, then collapsed, the second cameras stopped rolling. On It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, he turned pain into comedy, grotesque, fearless comedy, but every laugh cost him. By 2025, he'd had enough of silence. He finally went public, not for sympathy, but to demand the medical world take the disease seriously.
And then a while went by, and I just said, I just gave my opinion of the show, that I thought it was a terrific show. And then like a few months went by and they said, would you consider being on it?
By then, the personal cracks were already showing. In 2015, he and Rhea Perlman sold off their Beverly Hills palace, a sprawling 14,579 square foot compound with 2 pools, a wine cellar, and a private art studio. The sale wasn't just downsizing. It was the symbolic closing of a chapter, the end of the DeVito-Perlman Hollywood dream home era. Their 3 kids were grown, and the family wasn't what it used to be. DeVito's reinvention revelation came in 2006 when he shocked everyone by joining It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. The network fought it. Too famous, too expensive, too distracting. But Rob McElhenney fought harder, and when Danny signed on, ratings exploded by 227%. And here's the kicker. Danny didn't cash in. He took just $70,000 an episode, pocket change compared to his prime. Why? Because for him, Sunny wasn't about the money. It was about chaos. And chaos he delivered. In one episode, he slathered himself in sanitizer and slid naked across the floor, completely unscripted. Another time, he clawed out of a couch covered in sweat, nearly suffocating in the process. He developed a rash, but shrugged it off. By 2013, he was literally bathing in trash water for laughs. When someone asked if he'd gone too far, Danny smirked. At my age, vanity is just another word for missed opportunity. It was unhinged, grotesque, and pure DeVito. But behind the slapstick, his body was breaking. In 2008, doctors discovered severe disc damage in his back. By 2010, nearly half his filming days were spent in agonizing pain. His mornings started at 4:30 a.m. with hours of therapy, bouncing on trampolines, switching between scalding and freezing baths, even hanging upside down in his trailer to keep filming. During a 2011 waterslide scene, he did 19 takes, blew blood vessels in his eyes, and still finished the shot. And then came the shocker. In 2012, after 30 years of marriage, DeVito and Perlman separated. Fans were blindsided, but insiders weren't. Rumors had already been swirling in 2011. Whispers of Danny's friendship with a much younger woman on set. The long hours, the secretive phone calls, the late-night absences. Hollywood gossip pages ate it up. They tried therapy, tried patching things together, but by then, the cracks were too deep. They tried therapy, 38 sessions, but it couldn't fix the crack. By 2012, the marriage was over, or so it seemed. In 2013, cameras caught them holding hands again. Danny had pulled a classic DeVito move, renting out the exact same restaurant where they'd had their very first date. It worked. They gave it another shot and stayed together for 4 more years. But in 2017, it fell apart again. Only this time, they didn't bother with divorce. Instead, they quietly cut a deal to split their fortune, keeping lawyers and courtrooms out of it. Even after the split, they never really let go. In 2019, DeVito bought a house less than a mile from Rhea Perlman's. They kept their ritual, talking every Wednesday and Sunday, and once a month sitting at their table in their restaurant like nothing had changed. Their son once joked that they still shared a Netflix account, texting each other from separate houses while watching the same shows. Divorce? On paper, maybe. In real life, they never truly separated.
I don't know why it's difficult for other people, but Danny and I have always loved each other.
But while his personal life was messy, DeVito never stopped giving back. In July 2023, he donated $500,000 to the very hospital where he was born, back when it was still called Raleigh Fitkin Paul Morgan Memorial. Today, it's Jersey Shore University Medical Center, one of the top 5% hospitals in the nation. For Danny, the donation wasn't a photo op, it was personal. Robert Garrett, CEO of Hackensack Meridian Health, praised him for understanding the true power of giving. Even his longtime friend Peter Cancro, founder of Jersey Mike's Subs, said Danny's heart was exactly where it needed to be, in healthcare. But generosity hasn't always protected him. His honesty has cost him. At least, that's what the rumors say. For years, whispers have circulated that DeVito's bluntness rubbed Hollywood insiders the wrong way. According to one viral video, the real backlash started when he opened up about his lifelong struggle with Fairbanks disease, the rare bone disorder that stunted his growth and left him in constant pain. That video claims certain producers quietly iced him out of projects, pressuring him to get experimental treatments to look more normal and shutting doors when he refused. No proof, but the whispers are enough to make you wonder, how much does honesty really cost in showbiz? DeVito turned those scars into a mission. He's poured money into children's hospitals, research programs, and treatment centers for kids born with bone disorders like his. For decades, he kept his pain a secret, grinding through arthritis and surgeries while still acting, directing, and producing. But now, he's speaking out, not for sympathy, never that, but to demand research, better care, and a future where Hollywood stops pretending that only one kind of body belongs on screen. Still, not everything has gone smoothly. In May 2025, Danny DeVito wasn't trending for a role or a charitable donation. He was trending for losing it on live TV. His appearance on Jimmy Kimmel Live started off harmless enough, laughs, nostalgia, and a few cheeky one-liners. But by the second segment, the energy shifted. Viewers at home felt it instantly. The tension was so sharp you could practically hear the crackle through the screen. Then it happened. DeVito snapped. No one knows the exact trigger, but multiple insiders swear it started when Kimmel made a subtle jab about DeVito's height and his battle with Fairbanks disease. Danny didn't laugh it off. He fired back. Voices were raised. Kimmel looked stunned, and when Danny stood up and stormed off, the studio audience gasped. Security had to step in, not to drag him out, but to keep the situation from escalating further. Within minutes, the meltdown hit the internet like wildfire. Clips spread across TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube, racking up millions of views. Hashtags like hashtag Danny vs. Kimmel, hashtag DeVito Unleashed, and even hashtag Short Fuse trended for days. Fans were divided. Some hailed Danny as a truth teller who refused to play Hollywood's fake smile game, while others branded him unstable and washed up. Overnight, the beloved veteran wasn't just an actor anymore. He was a controversy, and Hollywood ate it up. Bill Burr jumped to his defense, saying comedians like Kimmel are notorious for pushing guests past their breaking point. But Stephen Colbert and Seth Meyers weren't so sympathetic. They roasted Danny with brutal monologues that only added fuel to the fire. Suddenly, this wasn't just about one awkward interview. It was about Danny DeVito's entire reputation. Then came the rumors. Industry gossip sites claim this wasn't the first time Danny had clashed behind the scenes. Anonymous crew members whispered that he had been difficult on certain sets for years, and that Kimmel's show had been warned not to poke the bear. Others suggested his outspoken politics and constant jabs at Hollywood's shallow standards had already put him on thin ice with major studios. The meltdown, they said, was the excuse executives had been waiting for. Danny didn't try to smooth it over. He didn't even pretend to regret it. Just days later, he posted online, "I stand by everything I said. The truth isn't always pretty." Especially under the lights, it wasn't an apology. It was a declaration of war, and Hollywood noticed. Almost immediately, reports began circulating that several of his upcoming appearances and projects were being postponed indefinitely. No official reason was given, but the timing was suspicious. Whispers of a quiet blacklisting swept through the industry. Was Danny DeVito being punished for refusing to play along? Or had his fiery temper finally caught up with him? Jimmy Kimmel, scrambling to contain the fallout, put out a carefully worded statement. "I have nothing but respect for Danny. I hope we can laugh about this someday," but insiders weren't convinced. Some claimed Kimmel felt blindsided and humiliated, and that private conversations with network execs were far less forgiving. By then, it didn't matter. The damage, or the legend, was already done. Danny DeVito wasn't just the quirky, lovable Hollywood veteran anymore. He had become something far more dangerous, unpredictable, unfiltered, and untouchable. That's it for today. See you in the next video. Until then, goodbye.